Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about my hiking and my hiking history and my anticipation of hiking the Appalachian Trail. But into today's video, I decided that I'm going to share a more personal reflection that I've had while on the trail. I know that I've talked a lot about one of the things that I like most about getting out into nature and hiking, hiking up and down challenging mountainsides and then the rain and the sore feet and all that stuff. What makes it all worth it for me is just the opportunity to get out there into nature, away from society, and just reflect. And it's a great time to sit and think and assess your life and it's just a wonderful opportunity for reflection, and I've talked about that in my videos. But some interesting things have been happening. I mean, my channel, my YouTube channel, I started when I was teaching, and it was mainly a way for my students to follow me along as I traveled around the world. And then I would incorporate all my travel experiences into my lessons, but they were able to follow me through my vlogs and my blogs through the years, and that's where it all started. But once I started hiking the Camino de Santiago, all of a sudden I started getting all these other people subscribing to my my channel, and then especially since I've started talking about my preparations for the Appalachian Trail, even more people have been subscribing, and it's really interesting, and they've been leaving comments. You guys have been leaving comments, and I think that's really cool. And I think I've responded to every single comment, because my channel isn't a gigantic channel. I'm not monetized. I don't have nearly enough subscribers to be monetized, I don't think. So I'm not making any money from this. I'm doing it just because I'm having a good time. And that's why I'm hiking. I hike because I have a good time. In addition to getting out there and reflecting, it's just a fun thing for me to do, just like these videos. But yeah, my channel has indeed evolved though. And, I've gotten all these new subscribers. People have been leaving comments, good and bad. And that's one of the really, things that I actually like is the fact that I've actually had some negative comments, some of them constructive criticism and not meant to be harmful. Others, maybe a little bit on the mean side, nothing really horrible, but I've watched other people's videos, and seen them respond to, other trollers on their channel, making negative comments, and most of them are smart enough just to ignore them. But in my case, I'm kind of excited to have these haters out there. It's like, guys, I have a real YouTube channel now. There's people out there trolling me. That's cool. And I haven't had anything really bad. And to be perfectly honest, I need to confess that in the early days of the internet, long before YouTube and things like that, I think I am guilty of being a troller. I remember back sometime in the 90s when I was online and I think I had an AOL account or something. And, I discovered these different chat rooms, and, I've always had dogs. I'm really, so I was in a dog chat room where people that were, or pet, might have just been pets. And I was just watching people's comments, and then eventually somebody, types in there on the chat, I have a Yorkie. And I don't know, the dark humor in me, I just immediately felt compelled to respond, my dog ate a Yorkie today. And then another, sort of bit of trolling that I did, I was, in a chat room. It might have still been the dog, but anyway, I think people were first beginning to discover back in the 90s that, hey, you can hook up online, which I thought kind of odd, somebody 2,000 miles away from somebody else, having these romantic chats. But there was one. There was I noticed some guy and a girl sort of flirting with one another. And then eventually, and I was just following that just sort of out of interest. I think the voyeuristic side of me, I guess, wanted to see what they were going to say to each other. And, but eventually he started writing poetry to her, these little poems for her. And I don't know, the artist critic in me felt compelled to start critiquing his poetry, and I pointed out, that's kind of a mixed metaphor, and that line there was kind of trite. And anyway, I think he was so busy trying to think up his next rhyme that I don't think he even saw my comments. But the woman was kind of upset. So yeah, I'm kind of guilty of it myself. So I'm not too critical of these people, and I'm kind of excited that gosh, I'm becoming a real YouTuber. People are saying negative things, so. Yeah, keep them coming, and those of you that have been making other comments of encouragement and positive things, I appreciate your stuff too. And if you've left a comment and I haven't replied, I apologize. It's just that I haven't noticed it because I've done my best to reply to all the even the negative ones I've replied to. And in fact, I'm going to show you one. I had somebody just the other day going back and watching. He said that he had watched about the first third of all my videos. Had watched, I think, day 3 of my hike of the Camino de Santiago, or day 13 of my hike of the Camino de Santiago. And he was actually responding to something that I had in day 12 of my Camino. And in fact, I'll go ahead and put those, his comment and my reply, I'll put those up there. So if you can pause the video if you want to read what he said. But basically, what he said was he was trying to tell me that I missed the whole point of hiking the Camino. And, he must not be familiar with the term hike your own hike, because I said up front, the main reason that I was hiking the Camino Santiago was, for a couple of reasons. That my number one, my anticipation to move here to Mexico, and I felt like, gosh, I need to start learning a little bit of Spanish, and I thought that this would be a good way to begin my Spanish lessons. And then also I was anticipating hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I thought I'm going to be hiking over 500 miles on the Camino, so this will be a good way for me to sort of get used to hiking, those miles day after day after day. And then also, the fact that I, had just retired, and this is more along the reason some people, hike the Camino, that it was, an opportunity for me to sort of like set aside, let that part of my life go and anticipating the next part of my life. And I think that is a really legitimate, reason for hiking the Camino, and I talked about that in the videos. I think maybe part of his problem, he's only seen, he hasn't seen most of the videos, and especially as I got further along on the trail, I started reflecting a little bit more and talking about some of these other things. But anyway. And it was on day 12 of my hike when I made a comment about these stone arrows that I went back and looked at it. I said, gosh, was it that offensive what I said? And I'm going to go ahead and play it for you guys, and you can tell me if I was being offensive. But he said that my comments on the stone arrows showed a lack of empathy and a total ignorance of what the Camino was all about. So I'll run that video for you right now. So people, for some reason or other, feel compelled to take rocks and leave little messages, but mainly these arrows pointing you in the right direction. And I have to say, so far, this has been the most impressive rock arrow I've seen along the trail. Okay, well, here's another, not quite as impressive, but let's put some effort into it. And here's the little less ambitious stick variety. But what I'm wondering is, where the heck were all those arrows when I strayed from the trail. So yeah, that's it. Go ahead and tell me what you think, especially if there's anybody out there that has hiked the Camino de Santiago. Go ahead and tell me what you think. I mean, was I offensive, in that video in any way? Maybe I was. But leave a comment either way. I'm digging these comments, positive and negative. I think really he just needed to continue watching the other days, because as I went further along on the Camino and some of the later days, I did do a bit more reflection. But one of the things that I talked about is that, I'm not inclined to really share on social media things that are extremely personal. And so my reflections tended to be a little more generic. I started talking about, getting older and the realization of my own mortality, but in a much more generic way and without a lot of personal references. But that's not to say that I'm not willing to do that, in an appropriate venue. And in fact, when I was just doing my blogging for my students, I would, when I visited Auschwitz, that was obviously a time where, I really sort of struggled. Okay, how do I, talk about Auschwitz with my students in a way that they can relate to? And one of the ways that I chose to do that, or the way I chose to do that, was really sort of go back to when I was young, like they were, and my first opportunities to sort of engage in this topic, and so some of the missteps that I've made in my life. But later on, when I was hiking the W Trek in Patagonia, that was an opportunity for me to talk a little bit about my personal history in a way that I think was beneficial to my students. But one of the reasons that I really don't like getting too personal, especially I don't mind talking about the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, because I've made a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there. In fact, my story about my ego, wanting to get everybody's attention, because I thought that I could jump from the tree, and I ended up breaking my arm and not being able to do that hike as a Cub Scout. That was one of my silly, more lighthearted missteps throughout my life. And I've made plenty of mistakes throughout my life, and I have some regrets. And I don't mind sharing, the stories about, when I made mistakes in my life. But we all have, personal tragedies in our life and experience, grief and things like that. And some people feel very comfortable. In fact, I think some people find it very cathartic to share on social media like Facebook and things like that, how they're, experiencing their grief and things like that. And if that helps them, I think that's great. I'm not being critical of them, but for me, I generally am less likely to do that. But in this case, there was an instance of grief that I felt it was really kind of appropriate for me to share with my students. But the main thing that I don't want, because I have always considered myself a very lucky and fortunate person, and I feel like I've had a pretty good life. And as I mentioned more than once while I was on the Camino in my videos, I've dodged a few bullets. Life hasn't been a bowl of cherries for me all the time. But in general, I've been very fortunate as I've gone through these times. So when I share things where I talk about some of the hardships of my life, I'm very reluctant to do that, because I have, being a teacher, some of the things that the life experiences that I know my young students have had, and traveling around the world and seeing people in different situations around the world, and seeing them and comparing all of that to my own life, I realize I am extremely lucky. And so I think that it's not really something that I don't like talking about, my whatever hardships I've had, because there's so much so many other people out there that have dealt with much more difficult things than I have. But like I said, there have been some difficult things that I've had to deal with. And so on the W Trek, that gave me an opportunity to really sort of share some experience, some of my, we'll call them hardships, when I was growing up. And so I'm going to share actually the blog. This was in a blog form, not a video form, where I shared this reflection with my students of hiking the W Trek. But let me give you a little bit of background of what that was all about. I and my sister, when we were very young, grew up for the most time with a single mother, and in and out of different kind of household relationships. Occasionally, we lived with grandparents and aunts and uncles, and my mother would have different relationships, and so it was constantly changing. But for the most part, it was just my older sister and I and our single mother, and we weren't rich by any means, but my mother worked hard. But it was an environment where really my sister and I had very little adult supervision, and at the point that I had just graduated from 7th grade, I was in middle school, had just finished 7th grade, and my sister was off to college. And at that time, I left my mother and didn't live with my mother after that point. And my sister went off to college, and I was off into a whole new household. In fact, my name even changed. I had a new last name, which was interesting, getting used to being a different person, really. And at the time, even though it wasn't an ideal situation that I went to, but it really was better. I think I'm very fortunate that change happened, because there was so little, like I said, adult influence in my life, and there were definitely some things that weren't ideal. And I think getting away from that, although it didn't seem like it at the time, I really didn't want to leave that life behind me. And the new household that I was in was less than ideal. I was kind of, you've heard the phrase, jumping from the frying pan into the flames. It might be more accurate to say I jumped out of the flames and into a frying pan. But I really found that was probably that transition in my life, leaving my mother and starting a whole new kind of life, was probably the most traumatic point in my life, my biggest life change. And there were many years after that where I really wasn't that close to my mother. And even at a certain point, even though I was, for a long time, I really wished I could get back to that old life that I had, even though I'm lucky that I didn't. At one point, I really sort of felt like, once I had graduated from high school, I really sort of liked the idea that it was just me. And I liked being just me, and didn't really have, other than, Christmas cards at Christmas time and stuff like that, didn't have much communication with my mother. And then eventually, I think because my older sister always had a much closer relationship with my mother, and I think she eventually had a family, and I think she sort of wanted everybody to sort of be more family-like. And a lot of things she was doing sort of instigated my move to Dallas ultimately, and ultimately reestablishing my relationship with my mother. And at that point, we had. I'm really glad that happened. It gave me an opportunity to really make another connection with my mother. And then, of course, my mother a few years ago passed away, and it was shortly after that I left for Patagonia to hike the W Trek. So the trail offers you lots of opportunities to reflect, and I originally was looking forward to the trail because I thought it would be a way for me to sort of get away from the reality of my current life and the grief I was experiencing with the death of my mother, and sort of forget about that. And I knew I'd be hiking with some other people, and I'd be able to make these new relationships. But one of the things I started off this blog was that, you never know where the trail will lead you. And even though I was really sort of hoping to sort of forget about these things, what the trail really did was just give me an opportunity to really reflect and do some reflection on some things that I really needed to sort out into my own mind. So let me read that blog to you. We don't always know where our trail leads. I must tell you, this adventure did not go the direction I had imagined. But that's good. That's what makes it an adventure. It's the discovery that calls the traveler. The thing is, sometimes you need to travel inward, into your heart. That can be a tricky trail. As I packed my bags in Dallas, I was looking forward to just getting away and leaving everyday life behind for a couple of weeks. My mother's funeral had just been a few days before my departure, and I was thinking this trip would offer me an escape, or at least a little relief from reality. But you don't always know what awaits you on the trail. What's over the next ridge? What's around the next bend? The trail has many surprises. After exploring Puerto Natales, I returned to the hostel where I would meet my guide and fellow hikers. I was looking forward to meeting some new people and establishing some new relationships and not thinking about the ones I've lost. So I thought, until the orientation began with self-introductions, and one of my fellow hikers, Sam, introduced himself and his mother, Maggie, who would be hiking the trail with him. His introduction was an unexpected sucker punch to my gut. The trail has its rewards, but it also comes with its pain. It seems as though I would need to travel to the bottom of the earth to discover something hidden in my own heart. We all hike our own trails, and sometimes we'll meet along the way. Of course, my trail began with my mother, but her trail and mine would go different directions after I completed 7th grade. Some trails are tougher than others, and both my mother and I had some tough parts along each of our trails. But fortunately, fate would reunite our trails about 40 years later with the wind to our backs. My mother and I had a great adventure those last few years, and certainly these last 5 days have surely been a great adventure here in Patagonia. The trail offers so many discoveries, and every step had an amazing view of our Mother Nature. Even when the trail got tougher, it would take you someplace that would take your breath away, someplace beautiful, someplace heavenly. So yeah, that's why I keep talking about the trail as a great place for reflection. It's a perfect metaphor for life. So until next time, happy trails. Viene por mí, yo tengo el presentimiento. Como las cápsulas